All right, everyone, we appear to have entered a brave new world of sorts, a post-evidence era, if you will, in which people can make claims about others, and it's sort of flung around in every direction at this point. It's not just the legacy media, it's not just the establishment, it's not just the never-Trumpers or something doing this. We see it with Giuliani today. We've gotten to the point where evidence is no longer apparently required, and people are basically just crucified in the court of public opinion. Again, more evidence, because this happened during the Satanic Panic, the Red Scare, the Temperance Era, more evidence that this is a moral panic that we're in during a paradigm shift. If ever there was evidence needed, we've got enough evidence now. We can say for certain that's exactly what we're going through right now. We're going through a social change. You've got a backlash against that change from the so-called progressives. And from the establishmentarians who are at risk of losing, massive amounts of money and all of their power. So rightfully, I would say they're afraid and they're lashing out, trying to censor and oppress and target people. So Giuliani comes out. Of course, he's on Trump's legal team now. He says, well, I want to see all of Mueller's texts because I think they would demonstrate a systemic bias against us for political reasons. It's definitely possible that that's the case, but the thing is, Giuliani knows, it's a strategy here. Giuliani knows that those texts right now are private information. He's representing one of the subjects of that investigation. He's not going to get to see the texts. They're not going to be made public. It's never going to happen. It would be illegal for them to become public. So he's got plausible deniability. He can say, well, there's systemic bias there, I think. Mueller can't defend against it because he simply can't release those texts, proving a negative, common logical fallacy. The problem is, of course, if you're a super Trump fan, you probably assume that he's right. I would willingly admit there's a good chance that he is correct. Probably there are people on the Mueller team who have a political axe to grind against Trump. But the thing is, that can't be proven because the texts are never going to be released. And we see this all the time. It's like, well, Trump raped people. Trump sexual assault or something. Well, there's no actual evidence of that. You've got a claim from years ago that has been largely dropped. I wonder why, but you've got no actual evidence. In the Me Too thing is a perfect example of this. You have, for every case where you have someone for which insurmountable numbers of claimants exist, like a Bill Cosby or a Weinstein, we're talking dozens of people. With Cosby, isn't it over 80 people now? Or some insane number? It's like, yeah, I wonder how he could have associated with that many people who would stab him in the back. It's beyond the realm of possibility. Legal question aside, he should have his day in court. He should be considered innocent until proven guilty. I think personally the legal system's breaking down slightly on that count for him. But it's unconscionable to think that would happen. But then you have people who there's one claim about them made. Some of these people, they're like in college, or some fucking pizzeria or something. One claim is made and then their life is ruined. Just on a claim, no actual evidence given. Sometimes we find out years later that the person was lying, and it becomes a problem because the court of public opinion steps in. It's like with Steve Bannon getting, the bookstore owners, the Black Swan bookstore. Bannon goes there. He's like, I guess, reading. He's probably reading the New York Times, and he gets harassed by someone, and then the owner calls the police. He's not going to get to have a day in court to address the fact that people are saying, well, it's politically biased, he's just trying to protect Trump, he must be like a rabid Nazi, and so we need to target, people who advertise with his website, attack his website, dox him, harass his family and stuff, and it's just a metastasization of the same stupid harassment that's been going on. We live in an era in which evidence is no longer required for anything. And I think part of it is a cautionary thing. When Trump says, well, the Washington Post or whatever uses anonymous sources that don't exist, you should take anonymous sources with a grain of salt. Just because a corporation, which is what CNN or the Wall Street Journal is, tells you that they have a source telling them something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. There is no legal guideline preventing them from outright lying and making it up. There's also no legal guideline for someone who's political within an organization like that using an anonymous source that is literally like their fucking best friend drunk. There's nothing against it. They can use any source that they want. It doesn't have to be legitimate. They just have to notify people that it's an anonymous source. Say, well, we can't disclose our source, journalistic privilege. And they can get away with it, so they can literally slander anyone they want. So an anonymous source says that you eat diarrhea. Well, how are you going to combat it? How can you prove the negative that there's no source? You can't. And you can't force them to cough up the identity of the person who's willing to testify in court. Even if you drag them through a legal challenge, they still can't be compelled to give up their source in almost every case. Isn't that wonderful for these for-profit corporations to be able to do this? I think that's a bigger problem, by the way, than like opaque government within an intel community, or even opaque like Trump and Giuliani, or Trump and Cohen, like opaque communications between a lawyer or someone in a legal field and their client. The biggest problem is really the legacy media. Virtually everything that we've been told throughout time has been a lie anyway. If we look historically, a lot of what's reported on turns out to be untrue. It's a hoax, it's politically motivated, it's a hit piece of some sort, it's manufactured by a government, domestic or foreign, a corporation decided to put out a hit piece. It's not always coming direct from the media itself. With regards to the alt media, it's like they would say, well, Molyneux is a Nazi, and Southern is an extremist, and Styx is far right or something. And it's like, this stuff is arguably not true. But there's no way to actually combat the claim. At the same time, the alt media, if they make a claim that's false, then they get reamed by the rest of the alt media because there's actually some journalistic integrity on YouTube. It's actually funny, there's more journalistic integrity in some random online community than there is between the Wall Street Journal and MSNBC and CNN and the Atlantic and all these groups. It's funny to see. So remember, when Giuliani comes out and says this, he's got no actual specific evidence that this is the case, even if it's reasonable. It's a reasonable assertion because there's reasonable evidence that the Mueller probe is politically motivated at this point. They've got no actual apparent full-on evidence that Trump's involved with Russia or that Russia was itself directly involved with electioneering here. All they've got are some Russian nationals in a 10-year-old money laundering case. That seems to be the creme de la creme of the Mueller reports so far. But that being said, there's no actual physical evidence because you can't prove a negative. Now, can you? So we got to keep that in mind when we see things like this. That's about all. Peace out.